My name is Marion Ware, and I'm here today. It's October the 23rd, 2015, at the Community Media Center, and I'm volunteering with the Carroll County History Project, and I'm honored to be interviewing Harry Sirinakis. And this is a well-known name in Carroll County, and thank you, Harry, for coming and volunteering your time. And we'd like you to just reflect on what it's meant to be Harry Sirinakis in Carroll County, and to tell us a little bit about your family and your history. And maybe we'll start when you were very, very young. What's the oldest memory you have of growing up and your restaurant? When did you first know that Harry's was a place as well as you?
Well, my earliest recollection I do remember, and this surrounds the Baltimore Colts phenomenon that we had when they were for training camp, and I do remember quite vividly that we lived up the street, same place that I grew up, and when they would make their way into the restaurant after training camp, and at that time the restaurant served beer, and the restrictions on the NFL players weren't apparently in place then. My father used to call us, and he used to say, "They're here, come on down," and I would sort of sit mutely in the corner watching these big mammoth guys enjoy and the fraternity that was this football team. And I remember being in the restaurant at those times. That was my earliest memory. And Sundays we would go also in, and because the restaurant was only open 6 days a week. It's a 7-day-a-week operation. It always has been, continues to be to this day. And my father would prep food, and we would be down there as a young guy, and I'd be standing on a crate, and I would be flipping burgers to pre-fry them because they made the burgers from scratch. And that, it was, life on Sundays was somewhat around the restaurant. We also had a table in the back, which was the family table. So when you went in, you had meals with mom and dad because they were working. It was that we'd stop in for a snack after school. We went to St. John's, and we would walk down, and we'd get our snack and our hot dog at the family table back at the old, at 54 West Main Street is what it was, the original restaurant.
Interesting. So can you tell me a little bit about the origins of Harry's, so your parents and...
Sure.
Obviously, Sirinakis, you're very Greek. So can we talk a little bit in terms of their story of coming here?
Sure.
And ending up in Westminster?
Well, it's interesting. The original owner of the restaurant was my grandfather, and I am his namesake, and his name was Harry Amprasis. And as the story goes, Harry was a great businessman, and he came from Greece with his brother in early 1900s, like 1910, and they settled in Manchester, New Hampshire. They worked in a factory for a while and realized, we researched the Ellis Island transaction, and we saw their entry papers. It was really an interesting thing. And they migrated and came down through, they got out of that business, and they got into the restaurant business. As the joke goes, and two Greeks get together, they open a restaurant. So my grandfather and his brother qualified, so they opened restaurants. From New Hampshire, they worked their way down into Pennsylvania, and I think they went as far west as West Virginia. They were in Virginia, set up, operated, and then sold them. Moved on to another location and worked way down, had some things in Gettysburg as well. But and it's interesting, and that story sort of held up for a long time. And as I got older, I questioned some of that. And turns out that when I was in college, I ran into someone who we started talking. Her family she was half Greek. Her father was Greek. We did the research, found out that he actually bought one of my grandfather's restaurants in State College, Pennsylvania. So that added validation to that. So he was really an entrepreneur, and he's the one who started us on this path. So they settled in Westminster, and my father married my mother, and this is really shortening the story, but my father married my mother in 1958, and in 1959 they bought the restaurant. So the generation passed, my grandmother and grandfather retired. So at that point, it was Harry's Lunch. They ran it until 1986, 87, when I took over and changed the name. And that time we remodeled and created the Harry's Main Street Grille identity. And I've been at it for 29, 30 years.
Right. So I would like you to talk a little bit, because from my own personal memories, I remember Harry's. I always think of Harry's as the place people met, gathered, talked, discussed everything, especially in terms of even the political life in Carroll County. So,
Yeah.
I mean, your breakfast was always packed with all the movers and shakers of Carroll County.
Right. Yeah, it was quite a phenomenon. It's about the time I took over, I was a little taken back by it as well, and I didn't realize how many people that were important people in the restaurant. As I gained a little more knowledge about my customer base, I realized that what you say is indeed true. Everybody from the plumber to the politician to the mayor, all in there, all the same time. It was a free forum for discussing. If you couldn't get an appointment with the mayor, you could come down to the restaurant, he'd be there. And you could talk to him face to face and sit across the booth for him. So it really was, and continues to be, I think, a microcosm of the identity and the people that flow in and out of Carroll County. It's where business gets done. They used to say business gets done on the golf course. Well, in the wintertime, we used to say it gets done at Harry's because they're not on the golf course. So. But yeah, it really is true, and that phenomenon still carries today. You see lots of people. I do recall, and there's a tradition, I will go, it will remain unnamed, but an election day, some of the judges and some of the people that are running for offices and House of Representative people always show up. They're still campaigning to the last minute, so, and they're there.
Right. So you want to talk a little bit about yourself in terms of sort of, here you are, and you're at a very young age just kind of inducted into the whole restaurant business.
Yeah.
Did you have a passion for food? Did you see this as something you just must do, or tell me a little bit about?
Not at all.
Did you like to cook?
Not at all. I guess it was a.
Because the food is good. I mean, somebody there likes to cook.
Right.
So.
Well, I've learned to like to cook.
Okay.
The restaurant, it's interesting. The restaurant has many dimensions to it. Part of it is cooking, part of it is managing and running, part of it is being an owner. So there's lots of those things. But at this point now, when we talk about ourselves as we're a human resources company that happens to sell food, because the restaurant business has changed. However, when I got into the business, and I was 26 years old, and I was the least likely of my brothers and my brother and my sister to take over the restaurant. I was the guy.
How many siblings?
I have an older brother and a younger sister. And I was the guy who went 8.5 hours away to college because I didn't want to be in the restaurant business. I didn't want anything to do with the restaurant business. And there I am back in the restaurant business. So my father, and these may be embarrassing stories, but I think they need to be told so that people know. I was the guy who my father had to shake to get out of bed in the morning to get to come down to work when I was in high school to run the grill for him. And, it wasn't about running the grill. They could run the grill themselves, but it was about getting me up and and doing things and being part of that restaurant. And my father was a very wise man, and he always needed me to help him with something at the restaurant, whether it was cooking this or holding this box or or pre-frying burgers, just to get it. And that's what Greek parents do, I think. They're testing the waters. Is there an interest there? Is there something that they can carry forward? Because as a third-generation business, that's a rarity. It really is. I mean, ask a banker, ask a lawyer. They'll tell you, 2 generations, tough. 3, rare. So, but I was, like I said, went away to college and settled in Frederick when I came back, and we were doing some convention and trade shows, and we worked for a national convention and trade show company. And spent a lot of time traveling around the U.S., and I was liked what I do. I love to travel. Still to this day, I love to travel. And we saw, all the major cities, and we worked, and we came back. But at some point, I did that for 7 years, 4 years, I think it was, 4 years. And then I said, this is getting to be tiring. I love to travel, but it was tiring. So I walked into my mother and father's house, and in my parents' house, their bedroom was at the back of the house. So whether anything was discussed, and we call it the room, and when big important things had to be discussed, you went to the back bedroom. If there were disciplinary actions being served, you went to the back bedroom. You knew the back bedroom was the place that things happened. So I walked in, and my intention is to discuss the opportunity of opening up a small version of Harry's Lunch at that time in Frederick, because I'd settled in Frederick. I liked Frederick. It was great. Turns out I had met my who was to be my future wife there at the same company we worked at. So I went in the intention to ask him for a small loan after being out of school for 5 years and 6 years, and saying, I want to do something different. I want to do this, Well, as it happens, my mother and father literally the day before woke up and said, we need to retire. So, as the story goes, I walked in, right place, right time. I asked him for money. He said, how about this? And I looked over at my mother, who was sitting off to the right, and she was just crying, couldn't stop crying, because my mother was a very spiritual and prayerful woman, and, God had answered her prayers. I walked in, and they didn't know what to do. They talked about retiring. They didn't know how to get out of the business, and I walked in. So we made the transaction on a handshake, and then we went to the bank, and the rest is history. So
That's a great story.
So it's an
inheritance
yes.
of all that it is,
Yeah. So it was interesting, and some days, I tell that story, and it always brings back an emotion, because I remember exactly everything that was said, and just being in that room, and it was just a very meaningful thing. But that's how it was done.
Well, and I think, at least from what and maybe this is just my stereotype, but I think that I think of Greek families as being close, family-oriented, and having the kind of values that are around sort of work and family. And so it seems to me that this works right in 3 generations.
Yeah.
It's not just about the business. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not. It's about families, and it really is that. I mean, the restaurant business, I feel it's akin to farming, okay? And you have to be there. It's a full-time occupation. It's a lifestyle. And if in the early days, the same pattern came through as I was talking about families getting involved in it. My mother and her sister and her brother were all 3 involved in the restaurant. They went around their school schedule. Somebody opened the restaurant with my grandfather. Somebody worked the afternoon shift. Somebody worked the dinner shift, and it all became part of the way they did business. Family. We try to run the restaurant at this point, and since I took over really as a family, you have to have a family and community spirit. So I think that's part of our success, and I think that that's important that we, and I can tell you that we've had some young people come through, and it's very rewarding. They come back and say, you know what, I remember you told me this, this, and this, and I said, well, great, I'm glad that helped. And they go, oh my gosh, it was great. It took me on a different path, and it was a wonderful experience working there. So we treat people like family. I happen to be the only person from my family working there on a regular basis, but I'm a solo act, but we treat it like family. The lessons that were passed down from my parents, the lessons that we've learned from being a part of that Greek family that you talk about, are alive and well with inside the restaurant, so that's a great thing.
Yeah, and it's a connection to community, because I do think that is, so it spreads out into the community, and that is what makes you successful, is that people feel that, which is more than a business, more than
Right.
food. It's a place that's warm and that people want
Right.
to come to.
Well, and I'm a real live person, so
Yeah.
I'm not a name of some corporate restaurant
That's
down the road.
exactly
So they
right.
come in and they see me, and I hear that a lot. And I cultivate the young kids, and I have a couple of young members of our community who actually, they come back and make their own food, and we get a crate just like I started, and I put an apron on them, and they sit there, and we let them dip their own pasta, and they make their own hot dog, and it's really kind of cool, and it's rewarding. So we're a family restaurant from that standpoint, and you know, we're creating that same spirit within the young people here. So.
And also, I think if you talk just a little bit about how much it's changed, you know, your memories of even your grandfather, your father, and the way they did things, and now, because I know you're also into catering, how the business has changed and how the community has changed. I mean, how much Carroll has changed.
Yeah, it really has. As I said earlier, I said, you know, at this point, we're a human resources company that happens to sell food. You really have to take care of business with recessions and regulations and all the things that are associated with running a business. You have to be very diligent in making sure that you protect that investment. You know, Carroll County has changed. We're more of a bedroom community. You know, you don't see people 3 meals a day anymore, 2 meals a day. We have customers that used to come in 3 meals a day. That's where they ate. You know, now we compete for that same person that is, look around. I mean, look at the chains. I mean, we've been populated very well. When I started, there was only McDonald's, and there was Geno's, if you remember Geno's, down by where Roy Rogers is now, and Balkers, and the Twin Kiss, which is plumb crazy. But there wasn't Bob Evans. There wasn't any of those other restaurants. Friendly's wasn't there. All the development up on the right side, where Target is, Lowe's, all that, nothing was there. So we have to reinvent ourselves. So we expanded, as you know, and we did that in 1999. So, and I think if we hadn't, we probably wouldn't have survived, because the model had to change. The business model had to change. And, you know, there is if I tell people, I said, you know, look, how many national hot dog chains, take Nathan's out of the business, out of the equation, how many national hot dog chains can you name? And they're stumped. How many national burger chains can you name? Well, they come rolling off your tongue. But so the model had to change. So the risk we took in 1999 paid off, I believe. And it helped us move ahead, helped us be more competitive, met some great chefs and great people and great managers that came through, and it let us do things, as you said, like catering. And we do a fair amount of catering. We do some great, we have some great customers, repeat customers, businesses in Carroll County that use us, yourself included. I don't know if it's appropriate to mention that, but we appreciate the business. Catering, delivery, the way the restaurant looks now, it's more inviting to somebody who might look at what they see on 140 and find us downtown, and it's a calling card for bringing people in. It's an attractive building, I feel, and it's really it's an inviting place, and we have a very eclectic menu that is not limited to just hot dogs and burgers, and it's very popular. Right now we're running a menu that has been on the table for about a year, and I term it the best of, like they have the greatest hits of, you know, whatever rock group you imagine. This is the greatest hits of Harry's. So we have lots of the old items that are there, and we have lots of new items that are very popular and still sell.
I remember that one of the first times that I went into your restaurant, it was actually with past director, Mike Hannon, of the CMC. And he said, oh, we have to go to Harry's. I have to show you Harry's. And he ordered the hot dog with half a cup of onions, chili. It had everything. It was the biggest hot dog plate I have ever seen. And he ordered a side of chili. And I thought, oh my God. But there are still, I mean, it is great chili and great hot dogs, and people still, you know, at lunchtime, that's what they fly in there, even in takeout, which you also have.
Absolutely.
So,
We, like I said, we do delivery, we do takeout, and if you can't get to us, we'll get to you. We'll do mail order, we do everything. And it's interesting, we still sell a lot of hot dogs.
Right.
The other thing that's really interesting, or the thing that has become a phenomenon, I think, in Carroll County, is our coleslaw, and I'm sure you probably had that.
Absolutely.
Very, very, very popular. As a matter of fact, we just went on hiatus with that. Our machine that we'd been using since for as long as I've been there, for 30 years, the same machine broke, couldn't get it fixed, couldn't get parts. Like an old car, you can't get parts. So we had to buy a whole new motor, but we were down and out of Coleslaw for about 3.5 weeks. And we posted on Facebook, and we tried to get the word out, and I can tell you that my servers were just laughing because people would come in, and the stories they would tell about, but I drove all the way from Timonium for this coleslaw. It's like, sir, I just don't have any for you. Well, I know you keep some behind there. Don't you have some for your family? Don't you have some? I was like, sir, the machine is broken. We posted a thing. It makes sense. The machine is broken. It just didn't exist. We couldn't manufacture it. So that really reinforced for us what a phenomenon the coleslaw has been along with the hot dogs. And I was glad to report, as of this week, Monday, we got it repaired, and coleslaw is flowing through Harry's pipelines again. So the world is can be at ease now. So
Great. Harry, talk a little bit about your growing up in Carroll County and sort of what that was like then. Besides the restaurant, what was it like?
You know, I'm born and raised in Carroll County, and you know, it's funny. My son, who is now 21 years old, and one of our favorite shows is that 70s show. Okay, so growing up in Carroll County for me was somewhere between American Graffiti and that 70s show. And my son would ask, "Did you do that?" And, yeah, we did that. Yeah. That was, you know, it was the 70s, and it was really an interesting time, and, you know, it revolved around school, and, you know, some of my greatest memories were my high school days where, you know, especially this time of year when it was fall, and homecoming, and building floats, and the 4-H fairs, and these things, and really having that sense of community and camaraderie, and, you know, the nights were getting colder, and playing backyard football. I mean, that's what we did. It was a very, you know, we went to the farm and picked pumpkins, and we picked cherries, and we did all those things that a normal, I guess, a person of that time. We rode the back roads, and we explored, and you know, had Halloween parties in fields, and all the things that you would do. And we went cow tipping. I don't know if that's a phenomenon. You're supposed to say that on film or not, but we tried to cow tip. It's harder than it looks. But it was fun. It was growing up in Carroll County. The high school era there was a great time here, and it was a lot of friends. So it was. I mean, that was me.
Yeah. It sounds wonderful. I think it's, you know, nowadays it seems so complicated, and then it seemed like there was so much freedom to do the kind of things in Carroll County that most people now would find really.
Yeah, it was more laid back.
Yes.
I mean, and it's interesting, but it was still a small town, and it was still community. People, you know, the fact that my parents had a successful business in Carroll County also was a blessing and a curse sometimes. It was a small community. I remember the one time that I had my first car was a Triumph TR6. Loved it. It happened to be a convertible. Well, in the 70s, just like you did, you put speakers in the back, and not by today's standards, these speakers were nothing. They were this big. But we took the regular speakers and took them and put them in the back so you could hear it better. And I can remember being pulled over, going down Main Street, right where used to be Davis Buick, right there on the right side, past Carroll County Bank, now BB&T. And I got pulled over by a police officer because my music was too loud, and that was in a convertible, and I'm just a young guy. Before I got home, my father knew about it, and I read the Riot Act for the fact that I need to be respectful of things and the community, and you know, whatever. But yeah, it's a small town. It was very simple. Life was simplistic. The other story that I can relate to you, I can remember we had a teacher who, again, will know, unnamed, and when I was in high school, and he would give us a pass. He or she, sorry, don't want to let on too much, but he would give us a pass to go out to the restaurant and get hot dogs, bring them back for him for lunch. Now, this when we were seniors, so, you know, it was a fun, simple time. People didn't, you know, it wasn't necessarily always politically correct. We were simple people, and we enjoyed life. And again, being part of the Sirinakis family carried some weight, and people knew us, and the restaurant's identity was pretty clear. And it was you felt like you really belonged to the community. And I think that's important. I think that's kind of what's missing these days. Everyone's detached. Everyone can send a text or email somebody around the world, but they don't know who their neighbor is, and they don't go out and see who their neighbor is, and they don't interact with their neighbor face to face. So because of what I do, I don't have a Facebook page for myself personally. I have one for the restaurant. I don't really care for texting. If I want to talk to somebody, I'll pick up the phone and call them and talk to them, and I reach out and I see people every day. So, and from that standpoint, it keeps me grounded and real and the same person I was when I got into the business. So.
Yes, excellent. So, right, it's that connection with people is about interacting with them.
Absolutely.
Whether it's the restaurant or knowing them over years. And
absolutely.
So it's totally social.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, and so that's why I think Harry's has always been, supportive of community.
We try to be.
We appreciate.
Yeah.
Yes.
We try to be supportive. We do give, we do fundraisers. Our catering department, we just finished up Philanthropist of the Year, which was an
Yes.
event that we started with the Community Foundation from day one, and I think it's a great event and rewards the other people who give back to the community. I think that's so important.
I do too, and I think even in this oral history project, that one of the things that I love about it is I kind of think it strengthens your ability to listen, but also for us to recognize individuals and to celebrate their lives here.
It's terrific. Audrey
Yeah.
does a great job there.
Yeah.
And I know we're
It's
both
beautiful.
friends of Audrey's,
Yeah.
but she's great. I'm on a fan club.
Yeah, great. All right, Harry, I want to thank you for coming.
Sure.
I think we're at the end, but I do want to do a program around sort of your restaurant as well as your memories of Carroll County. Anything else that you think is important that strikes you as something particularly? Why don't you talk just briefly about what you brought me in, which is the Greek families
Sure.
of Westminster, in terms of that history.
I'd be happy
That's
to.
a beautiful.
This is a very proud document you hold in
Yes.
front of you. This
Yeah.
is about 2 years ago. My mother, before she passed away, and our family physician, Dr. Dean Griffin, who was my family physician growing up, got together and they decided that they wanted to document the history of the Greek families. And there's just a number of Greek families that are here and people have come before that passed through Westminster, and their roots are deep in this community. And if I mention some of the names of these restaurants and businesses they ran, it'd trigger some memories because the community's roots are so deep. They got together, and it took about 2 years, and they put together the book that you have in front of you, and it's literally a amalgamation of all the stories from all the families that of how they got here, what restaurants they ran, how they interacted with the community. They served in the Army. This is a real, the veterans, the businesses, their occupations, their wives, their families, as deep as we could go. It just came out in print. We just published it in September this year. And it, in light of, Marion, what's going on with what the hot topic now about immigration is, this is a very pertinent book, and we feel real proud of it. And it's a great example of the immigration when my families were coming over, and how important immigration is. And this is just the topics and the stories and experiences are probably the same as a lot of the other immigrants that we see coming through today. But they're very proud people. My family is very proud people. Interestingly enough, my grandfather, who I mentioned was this tremendous entrepreneur, set up restaurants up and down the East Coast. His story is interesting in this book because he made a lot of money, went back to Greece in 1933. The war started. He was there through World War II, lost everything. Germans took everything, helped his family, everything, built up his business, lost everything, came back here, built it back up in 1946, and started all over again. And it's really a tremendous testimony to that spirit and that tenacity that we all have. So
Absolutely.
it's
So
a great
that's the
book.
Great American Story.
It's
Yes.
clearly the great American experience, and that alive and well, that dream is still there. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, so we will link to this, The Greek Families of Westminster, Maryland, and I want to thank you again for coming in. Thank
Terrific.
you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.